Hello and welcome. My name is Lori Wood Spears. I'm a certified family law mediator, certified divorce coach, paralegal, owner of Roseville Paralegal, and creator of the Divorce WTF Now podcast. Today, I am joined by a friend and colleague, Evan Samuelson, who is a family law attorney, and I'm very thankful that you've agreed to stop by and let me ask you some questions. So welcome, Evan.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning.
Good morning. I know some of my listeners know what the heck a family law attorney is, and some don't. Can you just give us a kind of general description of what a family law attorney is and what you do?
Okay. Family law covers divorces, child custody, domestic violence, which is basically violence between spouses or boyfriend, girlfriends, or significant others or other family members. Covers prenuptial agreements, antenuptial agreements, and adoptions, community property, spouse support, child support. I think that should cover it.
I think so. Pretty much anything dealing with a family, as far as a marital family. I know you don't handle trust. That would be a different type of attorney, or
trusts and wills.
That's an estate attorney or a trust attorney. So family law is typically I don't want to generalize it, but not a romantic could be a spousal relationship, whether that's married or not, could be parents of children, anything within the intermediate family. Is that?
I guess that's fair to say. I'd also add in grandparent visitation rights is also under family law.
Perfect. And that's important. I know as a Nana, I would be right there calling you if somebody said I couldn't see my grandkids. How long have you been practicing?
So it's 30 years as of June 15th.
Wow. Right there about the same with you. I think in February is 30 for me. So a long time. And what made you go into family law as opposed to any other area of practice? Or did you just fall into it?
I'd say I fell into it.
I could tell by the expression on your face.
I fell into it. I had originally thought I'd be like a corporate or business lawyer, but things have a way of happening.
Yes. And so you've been doing this almost 30 years.
No, 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
That's right, June 15th.
Exactly.
And so even though family law attorneys handle custody and support and all that stuff, I think today I just want to focus on the basics of divorce or what they now call dissolution, even though we'll refer to it as a divorce still for the sake of this broadcast. Mm-hmm. But how would somebody know when they need a family law attorney?
How would they know? Well, I guess they're breaking up with their spouse, or they're breaking up with their significant other and they have a child, or they're a grandparent and they're not being allowed to see their grandchild, or somebody has filed a restraining order against them.
Or serve them with divorce papers, right. Something like that.
Yes.
If somebody's just thinking about a divorce, would it be wise to contact you just for informational purposes, or do they have to actually wait till they've been served or the decision's been made?
Oh, no. I mean, a lot of people come to me to consult with the possibility of a divorce, but the divorce not actually happening. They want to know, if I was to go through a divorce, what would it look like? Because they're just thinking about it.
And so you can advise them on the areas you said, property division, custody, support, all that stuff, so they be able to make informed decisions moving forward.
Right.
And hiring a family law attorney, I know from being in the industry for 30 years, but I would imagine it's a very personal and important decision. And I don't know if, since you've been hired and you're kind of on the backside of this, is there anything that someone should consider when hiring a family law attorney? Is there something to look for?
Experience, knowledge. I always feel that hiring at least a family law attorney, I can't speak about other types of attorneys, but family law attorney is sort of personal decision.
Right.
I sort of think that there's got to be some sort of rapport between the attorney and the client.
I think that's largely important because it's one of the hardest things you'll go through. And you have to be comfortable with whoever you're working with from beginning to end, because you just don't need that added stress of not getting along with someone, not trusting someone. So I think having a rapport is maybe as important as the cost. It's something certainly to consider.
Definitely to consider. Having a good rapport, it definitely it strengthens the trust between the attorney and the client. And
Can help lessen.
Without that trust, there's going to be issues. So,
on both sides.
yes.
If you can't trust what your client is saying, that's hard for you to perform your job at your best ability. And if they can't trust that you are protecting them or advocating for them, it's going to be a really rocky road.
Agreed.
Perfect. That makes absolute sense. And, we all hear stuff about attorneys and how much they cost, and doing what I do, working with clients who are going through uncontested divorces. And we'll explain that in a few minutes. I hear a lot about they don't want to get a family law attorney because they don't want to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I don't want you to divulge your hourly rate. It's not necessary. But some people ask, do they pay you by the hour and they just get billed, every week? Or can you explain a little bit about how an attorney takes payment, just for people who don't have any idea?
Well, for the most part, family law attorneys will charge an hourly rate. And of course, that hourly rate varies depending on the attorney. All right. There's no contingency fees with family law attorneys like you might have with a personal injury attorney.
Which means that there's no money due up front, and it's based on the outcome of the case at the end of the case. Is that correct?
Right. So like a personal injury case, a personal injury attorney, they'll charge a percentage of whatever they recover for you. Family law attorneys, you don't do that. I mean, I believe it's prohibited by the ethical rules in California. Don't hold me to that, but
I'm not holding you to it, but that is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, how you get 30% of child custody? I'm not going to want to see your child. As part of my recovery fee.
Even if their child's lovely, you may not want to see them on a weekly basis.
Exactly. But yeah, so it's an hourly rate. And most often attorneys will ask for a retainer, which I always describe as an advance payment up front, somewhat of a security deposit, similar to the security deposit that you pay a landlord. But with me, as I do my work, I charge the hourly rate, I charge it against the retainer. And then, depending upon how complicated the case is, the retainer may be completely expended and have to be replenished, or at that point on, we go, I just send out bills and the client pays the bill
as they come in.
Exactly.
So you track your time, and it's billed against this, for lack of a better term, security deposit, this advance payment that they've made.
Yes.
And is it possible sometimes you even finish and there's something to give back to the client, and other times the whole thing's exhausted, and as you said, you bill on a weekly, monthly, whatever your office policy is?
It is possible that the retainer is not used up.
Probably rare in divorce cases.
I'd say yes, it is rare.
Yeah.
When the parties are very amicable, and they don't fight over anything, or maybe they go into court once for a 15-minute hearing and then they resolve the case. In that situation, the retainer may not be used up and they get a refund of the unused portion of the retainer. But you go to court at least a couple times, that retainer is going to be used up.
Very expensive to do that, not only financially, but usually emotionally and otherwise. And that leads me into my next question. A lot of people have heard the term contested and uncontested. Mm-hmm. Can you give an example or an explanation of what the difference is?
Well, contested is when you end up going to trial in the end. Your divorce has been a contested divorce.
So adversarial, really?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, uncontested, technically, as far as the court's concerned, is you resolve it without going to trial with a marital settlement agreement or a stipulation regarding orders. But uncontested is very broad. Because you could resolve things from at the very beginning of the case and save yourselves a ton of money.
ton of money, ton of time.
Right.
So for my clientele, I work mostly with uncontested, where the parties reach their own agreement, and I'm either helping them mediate that agreement or just helping them make sure the paperwork's in the proper legal format. So not all parties going through a divorce, contested or otherwise, have to have counsel.
That's true.
The reasons they should are
You get the benefit of legal advice.
Yeah. And when you're getting along with your spouse as far as able to form or agree to a settlement, it's still really important to know what your rights are, or if you can legally do that. So you're not negotiating from a place of misinformation or no information. So I think attorneys, despite the attorney jokes and the headaches and stuff people have told me about their feelings, they're invaluable going through that process, because without that knowledge, how can you negotiate an agreement? You may spend, and this is one thing I tell my clients, don't do anything that 3 months later, 6 months later, 9 months later, you're going to, I wish I would have, should have, could have. So even if they don't retain you, can they still come to you for legal advice throughout?
Yeah. I mean, very often a client is maybe going through mediation and they're stuck at an impasse. Let's just say for spousal support, for example. And they come to me and they say, this is what's on the table. So-and-so has offered to pay me spouse support of X amount of dollars. Is that fair? Or is that right? And at which point I will then ask for a little bit more information about the financial circumstances of both parties, explain the law regarding temporary spouse support and permanent spouse support, and give my opinion as to whether or not that particular spouse support proposal is fair. And what might happen if you go to court, for example.
See, and I think that's amazing advice, because support is a huge issue in most divorces. Mm-hmm. In fact, finances are a large reason that marriages break up. It's just very stressful. And while they're able to negotiate an amount of support on their own without knowing what they're entitled to or what the court could do or what a fair and reasonable amount is, it's very hard to negotiate. You're just pulling a number out of the sky and hoping for the best. So coming to you and having you give them their legal rights and advice and your input, I hate to use this word so often, is invaluable. And it's my understanding there are calculators that the court uses to determine at least temporary support or even modification of support in some cases. And I'll let you go into that in just a minute, but I want to back up and ask you, people have heard the term long-term and short-term marriages. Mm-hmm. There's a difference. And does that difference apply to support? If you could just give us a little bit of explanation on that.
The difference applies to spouse support, not child support.
Okay.
Child support, you'll be paying child support or receiving child support until your children reach the age of 18 and have graduated high school, or 19, whichever has occurred first.
No bearing on the length of time of the marriage.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, spouse support. Short-term marriages are defined as under 10 years.
Okay.
Long-term marriages are defined as 10 years or over. And so for short-term marriages, the rule of thumb is that the duration of spousal support, or more specifically, the court's ability to award and adjust spouse support, will be half the length of the marriage for short-term marriages. So if it's 8 years between date of marriage and date of separation, the court's jurisdiction to award spouse support and adjust it would be 4 years.
Is there wiggle room there? Could the parties agree to a longer payment arrangement?
There's definitely wiggle room.
Okay.
There's one case, can't name it.
No, of course not.
But basically says the half the length of marriage rule is not written in stone. Everything is ultimately left up to the judge's reasonable discretion.
And the needs of the parties and all the other factors that go into it. Okay.
Right. Now, when you have a long-term marriage, 10 years or over, that half the length of the marriage rule or rule of thumb goes out the window. The court's jurisdiction or ability to award spouse support and adjust it can go on indefinitely. There's no specific end date. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you're in a marriage of 10 years, you can expect to get spousal support for the rest of your life, but there's no specific end date. I mean, if you've been married for 10 years, but you're 30, you are still young and you have your whole life ahead of you. And so the judge may go, well, you do have the ability at some point to become self-supporting. So you're not going to be able to count on the spouse support forever versus, you are getting divorced when you're 60
and maybe you haven't worked all your life and you've stayed home with the kids, or your spouse, you've supported them through school and they were the primary wage earner. So it's probably a different picture at 60.
Exactly.
Even though 60 is still very young and you still have a life ahead of you.
Sure.
At least let's hope so, considering where we are at our stage in life. But again, the parties have free reign in uncontested or even during the course of a divorce to set a cutoff date or reach an agreement. But it's important to know what you can and cannot do, or what the court would do as far as being able to negotiate from a place of knowledge, I would say.
Yes, I mean, knowledge is good.
Yes, knowledge is power. And it's not always the man who pays support anymore. At least I'm seeing a change in cases that I've taken. Do you, and it really doesn't matter, I'm just curious, do you find that women file for divorce more often? Do you have more women clients than male clients? Do you find it even across the board?
Well, I think for me, it's about 50-50 as to whether or not women or men file for divorce. Maybe at 55-45, I really can't tell you.
But it doesn't matter. Some attorneys, family law attorneys, will say they're the man's family law attorney, or they're the woman's justice center, and their clients have a specific target area or gender and age group. That's not the case with you. You're an equal opportunity divorce, family law attorney or anything like that. Some
Correct.
People prefer to have different types of clientele or very specific types, and that's not the case with you.
I take men and women equally.
My next question is, and again, we know divorces are one of the hardest things that you can go through. And a lot of times my clients will show up with a support system, a mother, a father, a friend. And I think that is amazing to have a good support system and much, much needed. But sometimes going through the process, when you rely too much on the opinion of the support system, it can complicate things. You can feel pressured to do what they want you to do instead of what's right for you, or what's fair and reasonable and you and your spouse can agree on. People used to say, take them to the cleaners or take them for everything else they're worth, and the courts really aren't designed to do that. No. They're designed to divide it equally. And I've always told my clients that it's great that you have a support system that loves you. And I know they want the best for you, but they weren't part of your marriage and they shouldn't be part of your divorce. You've got to do what's best for you. Do you find in some cases that a third party's opinion or a third party being, involved has complicated issues?
Well, I mean, let's take, for example, a parent. You're going through a divorce and your parent is there. Now, your parent may be amazingly emotional, perhaps even angry with your soon-to-be ex-spouse. And so, yes, does want you and your attorney to take your soon-to-be ex-spouse to the cleaners. They're supposed to be there to sort of mellow you out and see reason. And perhaps that doesn't happen because they're angry.
They're angry, or they're imparting their experiences now on the details of what you're going through. Because really that's what they have, is their experiences, their emotional reasoning.
It could be that. Another issue is when you have my friend's uncle's sister went through a divorce and she got this. So how come I'm not getting that? And of course, I have no idea what the situation is with that friend's uncle's sister's divorce. I mean, the incomes could be different. The
Number of children could be different.
Yeah.
No cases are alike.
Exactly.
But I do get that a lot myself, and certainly I can't answer, and I don't give legal advice. That's not my role or position. But I get that all the time. And I also get, well, how long is it going to take? And how much is it going to cost? And my go-to for how long it's going to take is it's going to be as timely, costly, and as stressful or stress-free as the other party is reasonable, because it all depends on not just what you do, but what the other side is doing or not doing. Do you get people asking you, well, how long is this going to take? Well, when will I be divorced? And trying to put a timeline on it, and understanding they don't want to go through this for years. And most of the time when people get to you or me, they're tired, they're sure they want this, and they want to be done now. So do you get that a lot? And if so, what do you tell them?
I get that question very often. I'd probably say 70% of the time. How long is this going to take? And, I basically explain that there's no fixed amount of time. I say it depends upon the reasonableness of the parties and the complexity of the issues. The more simple the issues, the more reasonable the parties, the less time it's going to take. Now, you can have reasonable parties, but a complex issue, like a valuation of a business, for example. So that'll take more time. It's not either party's fault for wanting to value a business. I mean, you can have reasonable parties just not agreeing on a particular complex issue, but that complex issue will prolong the case.
And the valuation of something like a business that's owned by the parties, is that something that you would perform? Is that something that you would bring in another expert to do? What does that look like?
Oh, that would be a forensic account. You bring in a forensic account to review the business records and come up with an analysis as to how much the business is worth. And very frequently, not always, but very frequently, each spouse has his or her own forensic account.
Sounds costly and time consuming, but I can certainly understand necessary if the parties cannot agree on the value of the business. They've got to be able to have a finite answer from somewhere. But I don't even know if it's finite. If you've got two experts, perhaps it's more of a meeting in the middle.
I certainly wouldn't say finite. You can have two experts, two forensic accounts coming up with two entirely different values for the business.
And then what do? Do you hire a third?
No. I suppose you can, but I've not experienced hiring a third forensic accountant, because chances are that forensic accountant will just come up with
another different number.
Right. Sometimes the forensic accountants will talk to each other to compare their notes and compare their calculations. Sometimes it's just compromising. Take an appraisal on a home, for instance. You can have two different appraisers appraising the same home differently. And there it comes down to compromise. Maybe you want to meet in the middle. And if you don't compromise, you don't meet in the middle, then it goes to trial. And the judge will listen to the forensic accountants or the real estate appraisers. And then the judge will just have to decide for his or herself.
So again, it can go back to the reasonableness of the parties if you've got two different numbers. And depending on how far apart or close together these numbers are, there could be, a meeting in the middle somewhere. Or the judge is going to have the ultimate decision to decide that, and anything else the parties can't come to terms or agree on. And again, I do a very different job from you. I never give legal advice, and I get a lot of people all the time saying, well, I know you probably know the answer, and it's just me, and I won't tell anybody, and it's just a line that I don't cross. And as you can attest, I probably refer a large part of people to get information from you, because I just think it's important, and I don't want anybody moving forward without being informed enough to do so. But one of the things that happens when you go to court and you've got the judge, a third party who hasn't been a part of your marriage and doesn't know or care about some of the things that you're going through. They're just deciding, and it's nobody really wins there. It's just, to me, there's an answer or an end to something. If you can reach a settlement that works for both of you, that's more of a win-win situation. For me, being a mediator and a divorce coach and all that stuff, the part that I like, the part that I'm good at is the emotional aspect of a divorce. It doesn't stop here. You kind of have to play a little bit, or you're asked to play a little bit of a legal advisor, probably a counselor, probably a babysitter, probably a manager. I mean, are there different roles that you feel come with being a family law attorney?
Well, I feel definitely my function is there are two different functions. One is an advocate in the court. The other is a counselor. Not, and mostly I mean legal counselor.
Correct.
Okay. However, I do try to provide some emotional counseling. I am certainly not a licensed mental health therapist, but I will, when I see a client has issues, I will attempt to address them.
Yeah. And I know you're empathetic and when you need to be. And it's difficult because emotion or divorce is one of the most emotional things we'll ever go through. Yeah, we're telling people the court doesn't care how you got there, who did what your emotions are. The court cares about you're here now. And how do we divide this fairly? So they come to you and you're giving legal advice based on the issues and what the court, could or would or should do. And we're told to have them check their emotion kind of at the door and make a business decision. So it's really a difficult thing to ask of somebody. But again, and I've had clients come in and they want to tell me how they got there. And I appreciate the story and I appreciate what they're going through. I've been through a divorce and it was very difficult. And, I had friends and family members who had to listen to me piss and moan about it, but it doesn't make a difference in the case. Is that correct as far as legally?
I mean, I would say this. I think family law judges certainly can be empathetic, yet at certainly some point, the emotions do have to be checked at the door.
Right.
The finances are definitely a business decision. Now, child custody, on the other hand, I mean, that's where you're allowed to be a little emotional.
There's a little more leeway to be the, distraught parent or concerned parent or that kind of thing.
Presumptively both parents love their children, and they're just disagreeing over what's best for the children. So certainly some emotion is, I'm going to say, allowed there.
Normal. Yeah. Expected probably.
But it is a business decision, and sometimes a lot of the information being presented has no bearing on how the community property is to be divided.
Right. The court doesn't care if one spouse cheated or if there was infidelity. That has nothing to do with how they're going to decide the division of the family residence.
That's true.
That's true.
Yes.
I get a lot of people who, and I can only imagine the pain when there's infidelity, but they are still processing that emotion and are wanting to make major decisions while going through that. And again, I tell my clients, never make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions, because you will go through several emotions, but you won't feel like this forever. And it's probably not a good time to decide or negotiate support or what we're going to do with the property or retirements or anything like that when you're so pissed you don't even want to hear the other one breathe. So maybe there's a natural process to it. Just out of curiosity, we've all heard about COVID divorces. Do you think that's true? Do you find that your phone rang more? You got more clients after COVID?
Surprisingly, yes, for all family law attorneys. I think business has definitely increased, and the courts are getting congested and backed up.
Oh my gosh, they're running so slow right now. It's even as far as just paperwork, not even trying to get before the judge. The courts are very congested. But, I've heard of the COVID divorces. I've seen an increase. And, when we don't have to spend 24/7 together and you can go your separate ways during the day for 8 hours or more, and you're not right there in each other's faces, all of your idiosyncrasies or your flaws or your irritating habits may not be so prevalent or noticeable, or at least we have our own space away that they may be more tolerable when we come together. I'm not really sure the reason, but it's difficult to go through the pandemic and then have it cause a divorce on top of it. It's just, a really stressful and difficult time in the world right now without going through a divorce. And I know I've kept you here a long time today, so I want to wrap it up. But in closing, are there any words of wisdom or anything that our listeners should know when they're either thinking about divorce, whether they've been served with papers for divorce, or whether they're thinking about hiring a family law attorney? Is there any words of wisdom that you want to close with? And if I've tapped your brain dry for today, it's okay too. Whatever you want to leave our listeners with.
Well, I think, I'll say this. Think about your happiness in the end. You can get too tied up with, am I getting exactly what I'm supposed to with community property, or should I be getting more spouse support, or something like that, but think about your happiness, think about your future. There's the law, but the law doesn't always make you happy.
I think that's really great advice, because a lot of people, they're so angry and hurt, and it's so difficult to go through. And sometimes when you're fighting about that last item, it's really not about the item as much as it is the letting go or the finality of the divorce or something like that. So it's really difficult for people to see that. And if you can look a little forward in the future and find you're happy and maybe let that weed whacker go, I think that's great advice.
The weed whacker.
The weed whacker's important. Keep the weed whacker.
Exactly.
Well, Evan, I've had a great time talking to you today. Thank you for all the information you've provided. I'm going to put your contact information on the bottom of the screen should people need you, if that's okay. You're shaking your head yes, so I'll take that as a yes. I've known Evan for over 10 years now, probably closer to 15.
2008 or 2009.
So yeah, closer to 15. He's a good guy and a great attorney, and very knowledgeable. So if you need him, he's a resource for you. Again, I'll provide the information. Thank you, everybody, today for listening, and we'll see you next week. Until then, be kind to yourself. You're not alone, and reach out to somebody if you need them.